We are going to talk today about some of my experiences in UX research, and I come from the social impact sector. So I'll be talking a little bit about social impact as well as some methods that I use in research. And I'm just going to take you through some of the work that I do and hopefully make it interactive enough that everyone can participate. Okay. So this is about me. I don't know if you can spot me in the picture. That was at my first job. This is in a village in Jhansi. So a little bit about my education. So my education is in the social sciences. That's sociology and development studies. Development studies is an interdisciplinary course that includes history, economics, sociology, and it focuses on different parts of the developing world. That's usually Asia, Africa, Latin America. My thesis was done, the fieldwork was done a very short distance from here in a place called Mewat, where I was studying women panchayat leaders and their education levels and how that affected the gender dynamics in the area. So that was what my work was on. I did my master's at Oxford University, and it was, I would say, it made me a really rigorous researcher because just of how much resources and how many people we could meet, and not just in development studies. The first day I walked in, I met a PhD student in the cafeteria, and I said, "What do you study?" And he said, "Cryptology." And there was no crypto at the time. It was not about crypto at all. So I didn't know what cryptology is. I didn't even know that there's a field like that. And turns out it is the study of codes, and it has a lot of application in computer science and informatics and things like that. So I met people and learned from people that I didn't even know that they were studying things that are real. So that was some of my experience there. I'll be able to talk more about it. If you have any more detailed questions, you can ask me when we chat between or during the presentation. By the way, if anyone has any short questions, you can ask immediately. You can raise your hand if there's something that doesn't make sense on the slide or you want some more details. If you have some more detailed questions, I would appreciate if we could do it at the end of the presentation. So just some ground rules. Okay. Some of the domains I have worked in women's entrepreneurship, so basically rural women's economic empowerment, how to set up businesses, how to understand aspirations that women of different ages in rural areas might want, and education. So specifically in education, I have worked in training principals and teachers with 21st century skills or different skills to see how that would impact the education system. Now, I just want to make a clarification here. Often people think social impact is about, charity or distributing, items to people who don't have it, or it's always about poverty alleviation. That's definitely one part of it, but that's not the whole thing. So I'll clarify what I've worked on because this is important for the future. Just like UX researchers work on products, they may work on apps or softwares, or market researchers might work with FMCG products. In the NGO sector that I've worked on, we work with programs or interventions. A set of activities or a particular type of intervention at a level in the system. The hypothesis is it will create an impact on the ground. So for example, in education, in systemic change in Punjab and Goa, some of the work we did was training school principals and teachers and even state level officers with certain leadership skills with the assumption that they would affect the school, and then in turn it would affect teachers and students and it would have classroom impact. Some of these indicators could be something like attendance to school, parents' participation in school decision making, or even learning outcomes. Although realistically, from a social scientist perspective, these things take time. You can't just train principals and be like, okay, next 6 months their math scores will go up. If their math scores are going up I don't think that would not be reliable data in my opinion, unless some kind of magic is happening and every kid's math scores are just going up. So just to give you some context, the research I've done is in programs and in that kind of intervention, looking at behavioral change in that area. You all may be from different fields. You may be working in product design. You may be working in different kinds of companies. But I feel the learnings that I have are applicable to you, and most importantly, what you know is also applicable to me. And I'm really looking forward to learning from you as well. The places I've worked, Punjab, Goa in education, and Bundelkhand. That was my first job over there in 2018. I coincidentally happened to be working in the same project in a different capacity now. So I'm still working in Bundelkhand. That includes Jhansi, Niwadi, these areas in UP and MP. Favorite thing that I've eaten on field. As you can see from the icebreaker activity, this is very important to me, food and food opinions. There was a garlic and red chili chutney that a didi gave to me in a really thick roti, and उस पे देसी का मक्खन भी था, देसी मक्खन. Too good. There was a packet of chips and its branding was Bhoot Ka Panja. And the chips had a bhoot on it and the chips were panja shape. So that was also amazing. In Goa, I was sitting in a school and a parent came and said, I just got pineapple from my garden. I've cut it and I've given it to you. So I love that, and a great part of fieldwork is also eating research participants' heads. And thank you all for coming so that I can eat your heads today. So that's what I'll be doing. Okay, yeah. So some key learnings from the social impact sector. I'm going to move around so that everyone can hear better. I feel really strongly that constraints which happen in the social impact sector in funding, of course, because it's a non-profit, so by definition funding, time, because things have to be rolled out immediately, people, teams are small, we don't have that many resources, and buy-in. So suppose an NGO's MOU is with the government. The government is not funding the project, but they are providing the necessary clearances or the permissions to have that intervention. For example, with the Department of Education in Punjab. They may not be funding, but they are the client because they are implementing. Sometimes it is hard to get their buy-in and their trust. So you have to innovate. You have to do pilot studies. You have to get any kind of data fast, quickly, present it and say, can we please do this? This is why you should believe in this program. Here's the evidence. You have to do research really fast and with less people and with little to no funding. So that I feel it makes you innovate. It's hard, it's scrappy, but it makes you innovate. A personal learning is, for me, motivation and impact is a bit of a double-edged sword, because of course impact is really amazing and it's important, and it is the reason that you work in this sector. It's beautiful to see like any kind of change. However, the time it takes to change things is also, it can be demotivating. So it's hard to find that balance, and it's hard to keep thinking that your personal activities which you are doing in the day actually have that amplified impact that you're looking for many years ahead. So it's a double-edged sword. It's not a whole new world. So people think social impact is like this completely different scene. I just want to ask any of you, if I need a show of hands, and again, this is a no judgment space. Have any of you at some point felt कि social workers को salary नहीं मिलती? Yeah, this is a very common view. Okay, I am happy to tell you हमको मिलती है. बहुत इतनी नहीं मिलती, but हमको मिलती है. And I actually find a lot of commonalities between the startup world and the NGO world. We are all bootstrapped. We are all trying to make max scale, max impact in a short amount of time. Except startups can like monetize something, and we can't always do that. So that's one difference. But we are all chasing funders always. We are always pitching. So this is all common. So there's a lot of learnings to be had if these two sectors talk to each other, which is what I want to try and do today. Similarly, between people from cities or people with fancy educations who go and work in the field. It's not an us versus them. It's not a huge gulf of divide. That Didi in the previous photo, her name is Asha Didi. I learned a lot from her and I had a lot in common with her. She went to a sari shop where she got that sari, and I also went to the same sari shop. So there are a lot of things in common. There's a lot you can learn from each other, and to have this idea that we are going into the field to help them or to intervene or to do something, the terminology used is that, but the attitude is not really that, and that's some of what the research methods we'll be learning today. It's not a different world. We always have a lot more in common than our differences. So that's something important to keep in mind. Something I like to say that I literally thought of this morning, but something I like to say is go wide, learn deep. I have traveled to a lot of places. I have talked to a lot of people. I find that talking to people gets me most things. Talking to Shlok and Parul has made me stand here before you today. So if you go wide, if you talk to people, if you stay curious, if you're open to things, there are certain interactions and certain experiences that you have that will give you deep learnings, and they will stay with you for a long time. So that is also one of my learnings from social impact. I still remember some colleagues, people I've met on field, even government officials, for positive or negative reasons, and it has made me learn deep. So yeah, these are some of my learnings from social impact. Now, going ahead, I want to bring our attention to UXR, and I just want to do a quick check. How many of us here are UX researchers? Show of hands. Wow, that's cool. And how many of us are students? Amazing. Okay. Any other profiles I've missed out? Anyone want to say anything from the crowd? Any other job titles? Any other personal titles? Yes, of course. Generalists are my friends and aspirations, so I look up to you. Anyone else?
Yeah, hi, I'm Swaraj and I'm managing a design COE.
Okay.
You take mine, right?
Okay.
I'm researcher in.
Okay, amazing. Any other titles I've missed? Oh yeah, sorry, I can't believe. I'm talking about tech, and very sorry to the developer community for forgetting that. Developers, students, we have UX researchers. So great. So, and students, by students, you all are design students, or what do you study? Yeah? Oh, developers. Okay, okay, cool. Sorry, my bad. Okay, so we do know some things, at least UXR is a pretty catchy topic these days. So we do know quite a few things. So let's talk a little bit about that. And we have some people. So some things about UX methods, okay? Okay, so these methods often involve the user using the product. So you might have seen this in user testing, UI testing, eye tracking, any of these technologies, or even an interview, or even like a task analysis. You want the user to complete a certain task, and you see how the flow is. So some of those are usually around the product. Does anyone know any of these methods over here? Anyone want to? Yeah, go ahead. Could you explain any one of them for us?
Persona mapping is basically taking insights of people, what are their pain points and what are their needs and goals for a particular product.
Yeah.
And card sorting is basically dividing different aspects in a card form and placing them. Basically, open card sorting and closed card sorting.
Yeah.
And
Different methods. Yeah.
basically, we used to take insights of people.
Yeah.
A/B testing is basically we used to test from other people, like how our app or the product is working.
Yeah. What? Go ahead.
And task analysis basically how the user went to the starting from the ending.
Yes, exactly. What's your name?
Yash Ahluwalia.
Yash.
Yash Ahluwalia.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Yash. Everyone, give Yash a big hand. He explained my whole slide. I love that. Just one small change I would like to make to what Yash said is personas, as some of you might know, are certain types of users. They are what's the word? They are like an aggregate of a user, like a particular.
You can call it blueprint of your user.
Yeah, you could say that. It's a blueprint. It's a particular type of user, so you understand more. A/B testing also involves like two types of solutions, and then you see which ones that the person goes for. Okay, so some of these are quantitative because and most of them that mentioned here are those who use the product, are centered around using the product. Some are quantitative, they could be surveys. Of course, surveys can be quantitative, and some are mixed. To some level, I would say personas are mixed. I would say card sorting and interviews can also be mixed methods. So there's a whole spectrum of these. Okay, so that's something about UX methods. Now, moving ahead, let's do a little brainstorm. I need you all to yell the name really loudly if you recognize what's coming next. And by yell, I mean like really yell. Yay, amazing. We're in Microsoft Office, but yeah, that's Google Maps. Okay, cool. I need to know from you all, do you have any funny Google Maps stories, or do you have any stories of using Google Maps that you have any problems? Yeah, please go ahead. You want the mic?
Yeah.
Yeah, and your name, please.
My name is Arshi.
Yeah, you want to turn this way?
Sorry.
No worries.
So I think it has happened with most of us. So I'm a pillion princess. So if my partner is driving, I'm on the pillion seat.
Love.
And then he's like, where are we going? So it's in Bombay.
Huh.
And then he's like, ऊपर जाना है या नीचे जाना है? I said, नहीं flyover नहीं लेना, नीचे जाना है. And we went, and then it's like U-turn.
Rerouting 50 kilometers, yeah.
Like, okay, I knew it, but then that's what happens every time. I'm very bad at guessing ki, either it's a flyover or it's, underground. So,
It's never the user's fault. It's not the user's fault. If the flyover is not distinct, I don't think that's the user's fault. So yeah, thanks so much for sharing. Anyone else would like to share anything any pain points that they face, any stories that they've had? Yeah?
Hello, I'm Yashika, and once I was traveling in Jaipur as a tourist, so I was using Google Maps to go from the bus stop to Monument on Scooty. So whenever I saw the Google Map, for example, there were many ways to go about. There was a flyover, and I was under the bridge, and there were multiple ways. Whenever I went ahead, I was so lost. Whenever I went ahead on the path, I got so lost. At the end, I had to remove it and just go on my intuition, ask people, and it would just turn another way. It was so confusing. It would just not show me the correct way. It would just.
Yeah, it is very difficult. Thanks for sharing that. Thank you. Okay, so if we have some more stories, we can take them. But yeah, I just want to know if you want to share more of what issues you faced as a user, and what research methods would you use to find out more. If any of you are researchers, if any of you are students, have learned anything. If your case is Google Maps and you want to find pain points of users in 2025 today, the flyover is one. They did take out a feature, I think, in last year, but I don't know if that's very helpful. Personally, the navigation should start screaming when you, they should be like, "Niche raho." That's when you'll know not to take the flyover. But yeah, any research methods that you would use to find out more if you were given the case of Google Maps? Yeah? What did you say? Sorry? Oh, I thought you raised your hand.
Just raised my hand to problem to face a question.
Sure.
Actually, when we were going through the Jaipur, as you told, the alleys are so narrow that when you're traveling with a car, it's really hard. It shows the area that you could go through this, but the alley was so narrow that our car couldn't fit.
Right.
So it's a big issue.
Okay.
For that, they should have an option just showing that whether you have a small or a big car, to choose which kind of alley whether you go for national highways or switching from villages.
Yeah.
They should have an option.
Okay. Thank you. I heard someone say surveys here. Yeah.
Google does that, right? Like when you're traveling to certain routes or something, it makes you answer a question while you're traveling. So I think that could be a nice way to gather information from the user while they are traveling that particular route.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is an in-app feature that also gathers data and keeps it live or keeps it updated. I think users have to use that also. Whenever Google asks me, is there an accident here? I'm like, I don't care. I don't want to tell you that. I have to go somewhere. I have to look at the map. That's user behavior for you. So yeah, you might use maybe surveys to see how people use Google Maps. You might again do a user test to see, okay, what are they
I
doing?
would like to mention, we never have seen that on the app they are asking any feedback. So you might have seen that a lot of apps ask the users to, give a kind of star rating on the
Yeah.
app itself.
Yeah.
Which Google is not doing. I don't know for what expensive reason.
Yeah,
That's
good
kind
point.
of instant feedback.
Yeah.
So the journey ends, and then they can prompt out a pop-up.
On stars or something, how many stars would you give the
They're
navigation?
scared more than.
Yeah, I think so.
I have something to say.
Yeah.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
So, I mean, Google have one of this feature.
Yeah.
So once you end the trip, and in case like in between I have lost, I have not taken the route that Google was suggesting.
Yes.
I was taking some other route.
Yeah.
So when my trip ended, Google asked me that you have taken another route.
Yeah.
Are you facing some kind of a problem?
Yeah.
While taking that route.
Yeah.
So and there were like for certain points Google is giving some questions
Yeah.
and asking
Yeah.
for a feedback.
Yeah. If the user is doing something very different from what they predicted,
What they
then they
But
find
I
out.
think hardly people do that. Like we have trust on Google.
Yes.
Yeah. Although personally, if Google shows 1, 2, 3 routes and you know the way, you will check like, is this one the fastest route? Is it going through a horrible place? Then you don't take that. You take a slower route. Okay. So I just want to go through a little bit of history of Google Maps in 2008. Okay. I think that's a real case, by the way. I think that was a real story from what you also said that it was there. So in 2008, Google was really trying to penetrate the Indian market. And one huge cultural change was the difference in the idea of addresses. So ahead in the US, probably an address looks like that, a number and a street. In India, it looks like this. 101/21 3 for next to Teeth Studio, OTT layout, Chippewada West, Phase 6, Sector 59. And yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think it's like a bad or worse way to navigate. Definitely people who are here who don't have maps have navigated it fine. They know which gully mein, like they know that sector 58 is actually next to sector 16. They already know that. But the software was not able to do it. Interestingly, Google Maps has some very strong Indian competitors and it's not able to. I think MapMyIndia has been mapping since 1995 and a lot of companies still use it. But yeah, this was what happened in 2008 and they were really stuck as to what to do and they came to something interesting. Okay, so this is in 2008. Google has like eye tracking labs in the Silicon Valley. They have all the state of the art tech. But this researcher called Olga Krusteleva, she said, I'm not doing this. She went to India and she did an ethnographic study. We'll learn a little bit more about what that is if people are not familiar with it. What she did was she chose to understand the way people navigate on their own terms. So she looked up businesses on Google and said, hi, how can I get to your store? She asked people's consent to follow them when they were navigating some new place and understand how they were asking people. She also asked them to draw a map. And you've seen this on wedding cards. They always have a drawn map to show you exactly which plot because Google Maps is not going to work in whatever farmhouse that it's at, And the results they got were verified landmark-based navigation at several levels. I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like. Yeah, you can see some of the things that they did. Asking people to draw diagrams, following people around, recruiting people to keep track of directions they gave or received, and later interviewing them. Sharing early designs of landmark-based directions and asking for feedback. So of course that would be the one that involves the product. But before that, it's just understanding how people navigate, or even better, how people perceive themselves in relation to space, which is a much deeper question. When you think about it, It's not just about any product. It's about how you think of space, how you remember your roots, how you locate yourself, basically. Okay, and the landmark based navigation that they have, it works on several levels. One, orientation, which is the direction. Head towards the water, for example, या उसकी तरफ चलो. Description of a turn, I think this is very common. Take turn just past Big Bazaar, take the turn. After you see this signal, you will see this and then you take a turn. Confirmation of the right path, like when you are on this path, you will see a petrol station on your light, or you will see a petrol station in 5 minutes. And error correction, if you have crossed it, that means you have to take a U-turn. You will see it. When you see that landmark, you have to take a turn over there. Okay, so this is interesting because she must have collected a lot of rich qualitative data. Let's assume if she's called people, she's made notes on how to get there. That's physical notes. It could be audio recordings as well. It could be her field notes. If you are following people and you are understanding or making notes on how they are navigating, you have made those notes. From there, after analyzing that data and finding out themes, these are actually the insights, and these are directly product features. So from a lot of rich data, she's taken out these things to not just say that landmark based navigation works, but like in what ways. Description, confirmation, error correction, these things. So let's look at this. This is what they ended up doing in the end. You can see this kind of navigation. You can see they did add that. This is a route in Kochi, and it shows you the direction. It shows you the turn and the confirmation of the route passed by the church. And something interesting is you can see that it's on two-wheeler navigation. After they did this innovation, India was like the testing ground for a lot of features. Like two-wheeler navigation was India first. It was developed here because they probably got that feedback from people who were giving them directions that they have a two-wheeler at home, which is majority, I think. They now have about 60 million users, and people keep submitting, descriptions of places or names of places on Google. Something very fun is to reiterate how it's not about navigation, but it's about how people relate to navigation. Is anyone here from Meerut? Anyone? Do we have anyone from Meerut here? Okay. So my friend is from Meerut, and the location pin for Meerut that she loves to use, it says Meerut Badmashon ka Kshetra. So someone has gone and added that because they don't need to tell people where Meerut is. The map knows where Meerut is, but they have to identify that because that's how they relate to a place. That's the way they want to have fun. And you must have seen a lot of these kinds of pins, and that's what makes a product more, sort of user friendly, more owned by users. Although I would say like this was the innovation they did in 2015 or so, I think, when they started doing the traffic colors and everything like that. However, some things are still there. The things you said about flyovers, it's still not been fixed. One major systemic problem that they face, a very Indian problem, is people drive illegally. Like they go on the wrong side all the time. And I don't think Google Maps can suggest that people go on the wrong side. Like, there's always some limit to how much you can do, and it's always like some sort of systemic or like cultural reason. Like, look at this. Just look at that. Like, there is no way that they can make that path that people will use it in that way. I'm not saying there's no way, but I'm just saying how there'll always be something else to innovate for. There's always some reason why people are doing something. You need to get to the bottom of the why, and for that you need to understand much more than the product, in my opinion. That is called a desire path, by the way. There are many of those. It's called that. Even if they paved over that, I don't think you can pave over it. Any reason? Do you know why they are doing that? Can anyone tell me why that's happening? Guess. ये wrong side पे जाने के लिए हाँ but it's a sidewalk, so it's a pedestrian path. Any guesses? I need you to put your researcher brain. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. My guess, I'll say, but yeah, I need more.
just in case I want to go, like I have a bicycle and I want to go over there.
Yeah.
So in order to go from that side, I'll have to do this, I'll have to do that, I'll have to shift according to that pole.
Yeah.
So for that reason, they have made that path कि मैं इधर से चला जाऊँगा.
पर वहाँ से भी अगर आप जाओगे bicycle से, see, if you look at it, the path is wide enough for a bicycle and a person. So it, for me, you're right, but it seems like a walking path. But yeah.
Sometimes it's cultural.
What could be the reason?
For example, in India, we have seen like, no, you won't go on this side of the road, or you won't go this side of the temple or something.
Yeah.
So from this side of the world, they have a thing. This will struck on my head.
Yeah.
Even we have a lot of space.
Yeah.
Rationally, we are thinking like we have a lot of space. Automatically, we have a lot of space.
Yeah.
But my brain is trained in a way that okay, this is the best way.
Maybe. Yeah. Like you said, maybe they are actually scared. I have heard there's a superstition in Western countries ki don't walk under a ladder.
Yeah.
So it could be something like that. It's way easier to go with that, but people don't want to do that. So the grass has actually adapted to it and grown in that way. So desire paths are definitely, going to stay. So yeah. Okay. I'm quickly also going to go through some primary research methods. This is my understanding of how these research methods work. I'm going to go one by one and I'm going to try and give you as many examples as I can. So we have two ends of this spectrum. One is context focused and one is process focused. This is again my understanding of it. Different or better researchers than me might have a different view. For me, what that means is context means it's focused on the user's context, the context that user operates in terms of culture, systems, constraints, economy, things like that. Process focused means it's more focused on the process or the product that you want the user to use. So there are different research methods that go there. That one is ethnography, the one that we spoke about that Olga, the researcher, did. It's a very immersive, it's a very time-intensive method, and it seeks to understand the user in their own environment. Some of that you saw in the Google Maps example. They want to understand exactly how they try to make themselves a fly on the wall and try to understand why people are making these decisions. They try to say, pretend I'm not here, which of course never truly happens. They cannot fully pretend you're not there, but as much as is possible. An example of this could be, I saw this short film, it's on YouTube, it's by Red Bull. It's on B-boys. Do we know what B-boys are? Does anyone listen to hip hop? Yeah, similar, like B-boys, yeah. So they're like break dancers, they are in the same subculture, they're not always rappers, they dance more. And that film is about B-boys of Bombay. So the film crew definitely spent a lot of time with them for this, and if there were a researcher or an anthropologist, they might want to live there and understand that subculture on its own terms. But ethnography is not for like some very different out there subculture. We could have an ethnography of Microsoft. They would not give me the permissions to be in their office and make notes on them for 3 months, but we could. There are many corporate ethnographies out there of like big consulting companies, McKinsey, things like that, because you can understand a lot about culture and about processes that take place while doing this method. That's an example of ethnography. In-depth interviews are interviews, of course. I think most of us know what an interview is. An in-depth interview, I would say, would be less structured. It would have like maybe 5-6 large themes or questions that you want to ask, and largely you let the user talk. You guide very, very gently and keep them purposeful. Like you can't let like the talk ramble. You keep it purposeful, but you give the person enough space to express themselves. It involves a lot of building comfort and a lot of building rapport. One example that I have of this is I was interviewing a teenager, a boy, who had a learning disability, and I wanted to understand what apps he uses or what he feels should be there, to help him study better or do better. And I had 1 hour with this person, and he was my friend's kid, but I had 1 hour and I didn't know him at all. And for a long time, I had to wait for him to open up. I had to establish some rapport. I talked to him about music. He opened up a little more and then he did talk. He said, yeah, I use this. I don't use this. For example, he was applying to college. He said there are all these comparative exam ke apps like different Byju's and things like that. Not Byju's anymore, but someone else. But he said, I want to apply to design school. I want to apply to art school, but there's nothing to help me with my portfolio or the competition of that, because with his learning disability, he did not want to go into like a maths or a science based field. He wanted to go into something else. But that was 1 hour I had, and before going to the interview I said, okay, I have to make him comfortable, I have to let him talk, but I also have to get my data. And it is scientific to an extent, but it also really depends on your skill with people. That's what I feel. Observational study would be similar to ethnography, but more in the environment. Like for example, you go to a cafe, you are working for the cafe, you want to do the research, you want to observe how much time it takes for the person to order something. You want to see what they do. Is it like a cafe where people work, or is it a cafe people go on dates, or is it a cafe people meet people for arranged marriage? Like these are all different types of cafes, and you need to understand maybe the cafe owner wants to know what is the perception, what is the use of my cafe. Like social and cafe coffee day are two very different things. Even though they all have cafe food, price points are also different, obviously, but the way people use them is also different, right? And case study. Anyone who's talking about UX methods want to tell me what a case study? Yeah, go ahead. Yash, no? Yeah, go ahead, Yash.
Case study basically is the whole, like, a book of what we have done.
Yeah.
From the starting to the ending. From the starting, as you said, first of all, we empathize with people for interviews and all.
Yeah.
And till the usability testing.
Yeah.
And people, how people manages or use our apps or product.
Yes.
So it's a whole, it's a story how we have started and how we have ended.
That's true. That would be like the case study that we discussed for Google Maps, like a case. I would say that as a research method, you follow one user. Like that one user becomes your case study from the starting to the ending of how they use the app. So what you said makes sense for a documentation purpose. From a methods purpose, this is what I would say that it is. Thanks so much. So it could be like, for example, you want to understand how people using delivery apps like Borzo, you want to know how their experience of the rider app is. So you ask the rider, you say कि आप उठते हो, आपका order कब आता है, what do you use, how do you navigate, how do you choose which order to take, how far do you travel in a day. You want to understand everything about that user, and you can see it's at this end of the spectrum. So it is more process focused. It's completely based on the what do you say, job to be done? Yeah, you say job to be done, right? So that is there. This is not limiting. There are so many more quantitative methods, qualitative methods, focus group discussions, diary studies. There's so many more. I would love to talk to you about this more in detail. One question that I have to anyone, and I really want to hear from the middle because I feel like I've not heard a lot from the middle. What kind of data do you feel you get from these? Like for example, suppose you do an interview, you ask a set of questions. What form will the data be in for an interview? Yeah, that's the nature of it. But like in physical terms, like आपको क्या मिलता है interview के end में? Like what material do you have? True. Be more material than that. What do you call it? Like after you're done, you cut the call, you've done an interview. What do you have?
Synthesis of the data.
That's the analysis. I'll keep it simple. You have a transcript. Okay, you have a transcript or you have your notes. It's qualitative, it's written. If you have an immersive, if I immerse myself in an environment, I would also have the data would be in the form of notes. Like for example, for a survey, you would have it in terms of survey responses, right? You can sort by percentage or you can understand how it is. But for in-depth interviews for ethnographies, it's in the form of notes. And then what you said, आपने जो बोला synthesis of data, the analysis is usually in some form of coding to find out the themes. Okay, because at the end of the day, you have rich data. Sometimes you may need to put it in more quantitative terms. If you do a set of interviews with similar questions, suppose you do 10 interviews, you can get a percentage of people who answered in a certain way. So it is possible to get that quantitative data out of it also, although you would pull out more quotes from it because आपका objective वही था कि आपको rich qualitative data मिले. So that is there. So I'm just trying to make the analysis, make it clear how these kinds of data are analyzed, these kinds of notes, this kind of qualitative data. Because for analytics and everything, the way you analyze, you use Power BI, you use Excel, it's very different than this. So you have software that can do that for you. It can code, it can find keywords and themes. However, like we saw with Olga in the Google Maps study, she went through that data and she found out the different types of landmarks. You can get an AI to do the basic one for you, or you can get a coder to do the basic one for you. But you need to analyze and find patterns, and that's how you get better and better as a researcher to understand that. It depends. I really think it depends where you are in your research project and what your research question is. This is just your arsenal of tools. You can use it, however, like you said, remotely. Interviews you can do remotely. It's based on context, but of the user's context. As in, if 15 to 20% is about the product, the rest 80% is about the user, their mindset, their attitude. So for me, that also counts as context. There's also something very interesting where you can scrape data, you can do a virtual ethnography from that kind of social listening that you can do, which is from internet spaces, which is online, which is from social media. You can get a pulse on what people in a particular location are feeling. So I feel these are tools and they are applicable to different question stages and different modes also. It's not, obviously ethnography you would need to be in the place, in the traditional form. You can adapt this. You can understand, for example, if you want to know how many people are having conversations about Studio Ghibli, the AI tool, you can do a scan of LinkedIn. You can do a sentiment analysis. You can do that. It's not exactly the same thing, but it is in the user context. It is in that sort of thing. So there's that. Yeah, thanks for the question. Okay, I'll go very fast now. Okay, very quickly, I want to know, firstly, I want to know who all are from Gurgaon here. Wow, that's 3 of us. Amazing. 4, 5, 6. Okay, and who all are from Delhi? Like from, I'm saying native. Okay, who all are from other parts of the country, not from Delhi, outside? Okay, majority. Amazing. Are you all from cities or you're from other areas, rural areas? Anyone? Okay, cities. Yeah, okay. Rural, yeah, amazing. Okay. So, yeah, so I just want to say that, we have a lot of different people are from different places here. So, this is just something that I did in Bhojla village, which is in Jhansi. So, Jhansi is a city, but this is in like the peri-urban area. Can you tell me what's happening in this photo here? Anyone? And any other products you can see? Yeah. So her name is Kranti Didi. Her name is Kranti Bharti. Her shop is called Anshika Bangle Center. That's named after her daughter. So I spent a whole day at her shop in 2019. An entire day I just sat there and I observed how I talked to her also. And her idea of opening a shop in a place where women did not have too many opportunities was also to get people to, have a place to meet. Not to step out of their houses to chill. And I saw so many women of different ages come that day. And they were saying, someone had come from outside the village. So they were saying, "Arey, aap kab aayi thi?" And they were just chatting. It was not always about the nail polish or the bangles or anything like that. And then one of them said, "Ye sach mein milan ki jagah hai. It's a place of meeting more than a shop, So if I had asked Kranti Didi in an interview, "Kya aapka dukaan milan ki jagah hai?" She would have said, "Haan." Like, that would not have given me that kind of data. Maybe she would have not known always how to answer that. Like, what you want to know and what you ask are two very different things. What people say and what they want you to know or what you want to know are also two different things, which is what we'll touch upon in the activity. So, an important thing is, I feel that time use study is really important. By spending a day with her, I understood how she gets to use her time. Of course, before coming to the shop, she does a lot of housework at home. That's a huge part of women's time use. So that part was not in the study, but she told me about that. So even if you're thinking of products or if you're thinking of experiences, it is important to know how much time the user has to do what you ideally want them to do, the action or the process that you want them to take. So this was there. She was very kind to let me sit in her shop, and this kind of work informed something that I am making today. This is a small page from what I've been working on. It is a module, it is a handbook for women in rural India to set up their own businesses. It starts from everything. It starts from branding, from finance, even explaining what's the difference between fixed and working capital, everything. This is the English translation. Of course, it will come in Hindi. But the point I want to make is working with people like Kranti Didi and understanding them informed every aspect of this design. It informed this character. It informed which logos I put there. There's a reason I've put those logos. I've not put like Swiggy, Blinkit, whatever stuff we use over here. I've put arguably some really recognizable logos. Can I quickly get some ID on those logos? Who said the one for the tree? Yes, thank you. I asked my teammates that they were like, "ये कौन सा है?" I was like, "ये hair oil पे होता है. This is a really important logo." And Jio, of course, is very important. And the Pepsi logo has changed a lot, but it's very there. So you can't read this here, but I've used a certain example. You know, the shorter and catchier the brand name, the better. It should be under 3 syllables, like Godrej or Tata. Tata you see in trucks, you see in salt. Godrej you see in almaris. These are the kind of context specific things that I felt would be useful for this. Or you have the line of surf, which is Daag Achhe Hain, which again works for this kind of group. There's also an example of Amul, a milk packet, to understand how brands are labeled and why. So going back to what I said in my first slide, our intervention is not really the product. It's like this book. The design is for the book, and the researcher understands what the target group might want to read and designs the book accordingly. We worked with the designers to even have this kind of sort of design here. They studied what might be popular, what might be the local art of the area, and they incorporated that design. One more thing I want to say is, of course, my work was not based on one observational study. It was not that I went to Kranti Didi's shop and I said, okay, now I can write a book. It is that I and my teammates have met many such women and heard many such stories, and so we are able to design for them. So the point I want to make is, rich data is not a substitute for a good sample size. You can't go deep into one person and then be like, okay, I have understood everything about this target group or this group of people. You can identify what you want to find out more. You can identify more questions. You can say, we should learn more of this. And we can make these observations, but we can't make the conclusions. So that's the thing with rich data. It's a lot, it's great, but it's not a substitute for a bigger study. So that's something that I wanted to highlight here. I just have a few more slides for you, but if there are any questions, I can see some restlessness. Do you want to dance again? I feel like no one is on board for that. I'll zip through the next couple of ones. Okay. This was one more observational study. This was done in Fatehgarh Sahib in Punjab. I will start walking around, I think, a little bit. So, in this project, we wanted to understand how school heads and headmasters use their time in a day. So, school heads in government schools have different roles. They are administrators, they are leaders, they are teacher trainers, they are themselves teaching one subject, they have to maintain discipline, and they have to maintain relations with the parents as well. So they have all these roles. We wanted to know how much time goes in doing what, because there were certain trainings, there were certain policy level, state level changes. The Punjab government was saying सारे headmasters को ये कराना है, but we wanted to say कि उनका कितना कुछ है एक दिन में. How will we find that out? Me and my colleague just shadowed them for a day. We just went behind her, whatever she was doing, and it was very different from Kranti Didi's study, because as you can see, there's no photo of the headmaster, because they didn't want us to do that. They were very worried about being scrutinized. They didn't want us to take notes. They didn't want us to take, because they thought we might report something, So different constraints exist, and you have to respect the participant, whatever they want. you can still understand so much about context. Like over here, there's a poster. It says, "Ruko, socho, aj tusi ki sikhaoge." Stop and think. What will you teach today? In fact, it was this what we wanted to understand from the teachers. How do you prep for a session? How do you reflect? How do you think? What makes you what face do you put on that day? What do you teach and what do you learn? We collected a lot of stories. We asked them a lot ki tell us about a time when this challenge happened. Or if there was a teacher meeting, we would say, tell us a time about when a staff meeting went well. So it was a story. I don't think you can get any data point out of that. But the thing that it helped us do was this. We collected stories so that we could tell stories. So we created this case story which had characters and it was for a training. It was for like a case solving, problem solving training. And it had characters in Punjabi. It had a headmaster character. She has to, manage her different staff. They all have different motivations. She wanted someone to guide her. This sir is very experienced, so he knows everything. And this was a very different type of training. It was not done in this way at all. And the most affirming thing I heard at the end was they saw themselves in the story. They said, thank you, ऐसा training हमने कभी किया नहीं है. We can relate to them. We understand what's happening. So again, this was the product or the intervention that we created. And because we listened to stories, we could do the storytelling in this way. So there was this narrative and this thing created. So even if it's for a training, a lot of research, a lot of rich data goes into something like this. And that's what it helps create. Okay, we are getting closer and closer to the activity now. But I just want to make a few points about when you do like this kind of rich study. So there is an idea, there's a researcher and there's a subject. A lot of philosophers have talked about how this is not, it's not as it seems. So we can understand some guidelines that we can use. Curiosity is not just for cats and it doesn't kill cats either, I feel. Being nosy and being curious are two different things. Would everyone agree with me? What's the difference between being nosy and being curious? No one's ever been nosy? Wow, you guys are really great. Amazing. Oh yeah? Wait, who? Yeah, you've been nosy?
No, I've been curious.
Okay, amazing.
A lot of times.
Okay. And how is that, like, can you tell me some time that it was good for you to be curious or what you enjoyed?
Like usually what I do, I just go to people.
Yeah.
I sit, I observe them, and if I feel that they are introvert or they are extrovert, I try to connect with them. Ki bhai, what are you thinking? What are your ways or what are your thoughts on? So yeah, I think that is curiosity, but nosy is also something like that only.
Yeah.
कि हाँ बीच में ही उसमें आप you start concluding your own assumptions and opinions कि भाई I came here and yeah I'm being nosy.
हाथ मिलाओ यार. No. I found my kind of person. That's the second one. Curiosity is not just because assumptions are left at the door. Like I was saying, there's a difference between observation. Observation is what you see, hear. An inference or a judgment is what you think and feel based on that. We have to stick with one when we are doing. We can make inferences based on many sets of data. We can't do it based on one. And it's got to be informed by many different research methods. For example, I could make an assumption about all of us sitting here that none of us cook and take care of our families. Because we are all here on a Saturday morning and who is making lunch at home? I could say that, but I don't know if that is true for anyone or everyone. So that's an assumption. But someone maybe from a different context might be like, हाँ ये तो वेले लोग हैं, ये Saturday में आके ये workshop पे बैठे हैं. So that's an assumption. So especially while working with different people from very, very different areas, you have to keep this in check. Something that we were talking about just now, inferences have to be triangulated. Do we know what triangulation is? No?
So in triangulation, it's a method where you confirm your data.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Add more. So for example, you are doing an observational study, but if you have a secondary data as well.
Yeah.
But if you take interviews as well.
Yeah.
So you're taking data from more than one source.
Yes, exactly. And from a simple way, like the triangulation, when you talk about like mobile location, they make a triangle like based on three signals from your SIM card or your internet, you can identify the location of someone. You must have seen crime shows or police procedurals where they do that. They have that triangle and they do that. So if you have an inference, you gotta confirm it from your sample and different types of data. You can look at news articles, you can do secondary research. What we've talked about today is just primary and just qualitative. There's so much more, there's quantitative that is available to you. So there's a lot of things. Connect with other humans. I feel this is the most important part of being a researcher. We are all humans at the end of the day, and we all have a lot more in common than we are different. The title of the Google Maps slide, I don't know if anyone saw, it said meet people where they're at. So like if there's a distance, you close it, you don't get in their face, that's really nosy, like literally. You meet people where they're at, you sit at their eye level and you listen to what they have to say. And yeah, that's I think one of the most important guidelines, and these are important guidelines for your activity. And yeah, I would like us to go from UX to US. Does anyone know what US stands for? We're not going to America, but anyone? Interesting. Anything else for S? No, I'm thinking more in line of what we spoke.
User satisfaction.
Let's move ahead. No. Stories, guys. User stories. Service, satisfaction, segmentation, it comes later. The story comes first and everything else comes later. And we want to try and move from users to people. Try and see people in all their full context. And that's, I hope I have managed to explain some of that to you today along with the methods. And yeah, that's it for the talk. I think we can take a few minutes to break, or yeah, that's it from me for now. And we're going to do an activity. In teams of whatever, you will be assigned one of the following videos. So these are some QR codes of different videos. So because we can't go into the field and we can't do any research today, I've selected some vlogs. Okay, and this is how people film their own days, their own lives. It's just a vlog, okay, and you have to watch it and discuss with your team. There are 3 of them. So group 1 gets 1, group 2 gets 2, group 3 gets 3, and then 1, 2, 3, so on. So I think 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. ऐसा कुछ होगा, ठीक है? So that will be there, and then you have to observe. Individually observe. You have to make a lot of notes on different parameters. So here are some examples. So you can have demographics. You can see like what age that person is. You can just observe whatever you can understand. Location, family. What kind of culture do they have? Do they have any local festivals they speak? What languages? What are their interests? What do they talk about? Just the same way you would get to know another person, you have to know this vlogger. What are their habits? What do they do? What are their aspirations? Some of them might want to clear UPSC, some of them might want to pass college, some of them might want their kids to go to some college. Time use, you can understand. Time use we already explained earlier, okay? This is only a snapshot. There is no ceiling to the kind of observations you can make. Observations, inferences में फ़र्क याद रखिए and make whatever observation, just an example of what you can do, okay? And then first you note down individually after watching the video. You and your group will watch the same video. Consolidate, discuss with your larger group, try to understand what everyone's thinking, talking. Later, your group, one person from your group can share one of your observations with us. Got it? That's part 1 of the activity. Okay. I'll go back to the QR code slide so you can take the videos. If you can able to scan them, that's great. Otherwise, we have the links as well. And I'll keep the PPT on the observation sheet so that you understand that.